Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have people pop in um, as they're able to join. I want to welcome everyone to this Common Read event about tattoos, art, and activism. We have two fantastic guests with us today. Godi and Cremina Todorova. They are artists and professors at Transylvania University, I should say. So I'm going to introduce them, tell you a little bit about them and the work they do, and then they're going to share some information with you about their work with art, particularly art related to tattoos and their activism. Godi teaches studio art at Transylvania University here in Lexington, and he makes art to invite conversations about contemporary social issues. Things from marginalized sexualities to the experience of homelessness. Recently, he has become newly invigorated by plans to reseed the clouds over Kentucky with meat in loving memory of the Kentucky meat rain of 1876. Cremina Todorova also teaches at Transylvania University. She teaches American literature, as well as classes that ask students to meet and work with their neighbors. Born and raised in communist Bulgaria, she continues to draw inspiration for her art and teaching from Timur and his commitment to community. She became an official American on December 10th, 2010. Kremina's collaborative works are conceived to examine socio and political issues and questions of identity and place. They're very active here in Lexington, but they have also traveled to Los Angeles, Indianapolis, New Orleans, San Antonio, and Portland to photograph the people who live near the couches and easy chairs found on these cities' curbs. The result of that collection of images was titled Discarded USA. One of the projects they're going to talk about today is the Lexington Tattoo Project, which was a public artwork that placed the words of a poem written by a Lexington poet as permanent tattoos on the bodies of 253 people from Lexington. Kremena started a global movement that united people one tattoo at a time, and that project was based on the poem Love Letter to the... Oh, they're also working on Love Letter to the World and the Englewood project. Those are their most recent tattoo projects. You may have also seen their work around town. Their most recent artwork is Unlearn Fear and Hate, and it was inspired by a need to address the growing tensions around racism and nationality here in America. And it was the words Unlearn Fear and Hate were adopted from Love Letter to the World, which is a poem by Frank X. Walker. He is Kentucky's first African American poet laureate. So you may have seen the Unlearn Fear and Hate emblem around town. Like I said, they both teach at Transy, and they've presented their work here in Lexington, in Cincinnati, in LA, San Antonio, but also in Bulgaria, South Africa, and other places around the world. They've received awards and grants for their work, including the Georgia Davis Powers Award, and they really work very hard to be inclusive and to create an inclusive community and to use their artwork to inspire others to create good in the world. I'm really excited to have them here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So please welcome Kurt and Kremena.
Thank you, Savannah, for welcoming us and for inviting us to talk about some of our favorite artworks. So as we understand that students and many faculty at BCTC have read or are reading a book that has to do with art, tattoos, and activism. And so we're going to talk today about a few of our artworks that take place in public spaces, that take shape on people's bodies or between people's bodies, that humanize people to each other, and therefore change how people interact with each other and how they relate to each other. Specifically, we're going to talk about the Lexington Tattoo Project and a number of other tattoo artworks it inspired, and you mentioned some of them. And then we'll talk about our current and still ongoing artwork at Lexington in the time of COVID-19.
I assume you're seeing just one picture now, not the presenter view?
Yes, yeah, you're good.
Okay, thank you. So this is one image from the Lexington Tattoo Project. That is an artwork that for us began sometime in 2008, when an entire block of historic buildings in Lexington was razed in downtown to make way for what is now Center Point. So those of you who were here at the time remember there was some kind of protests. There were several protests to try to save those buildings, try to save those block. Some of them were led by artists. Some happened at the Kentucky Theater. And largely it was a point where a lot of voices were galvanized to support this city, this city block, which ultimately didn't work. But what it did cause is it caused the two of us and a lot of other people to realize that there were many, many people who cared about Lexington in ways that weren't made visible often. And so we talked about this for a while and realized we wanted to find a way to make an artwork that used that love for the city and pride to be from Lexington and pride in the city of Lexington as the primary material for an artwork. And we talked about that and tried to figure out what that meant. And it took ultimately about 4 years to come up with an idea that we thought fit that. And that was to spread the words of a text across the bodies of people who call Lexington home. And we didn't know exactly what the text would be at the time, but ultimately we realized we wanted to commission a Lexington poet named Bianca Spriggs to write a poem as a love letter to the city of Lexington, and then have that become what is referred to by some people as a mural on skin. So this is, we designed the poem. Oh, sorry, let me back up a little bit. This is the title of the poem, The Blank of the Universe, a love story. When we first asked Bianca if she would do this, she said she would. She kind of quickly agreed, but also just as quickly said that she wouldn't be able to write a kind of a traditional, if you think of traditional love poetry as kind of floral and sappy, largely because she said her relationship with Lexington was more complicated than that. And we really liked that a lot. When she was working on her poem, we went through and counted the number of words in her other published poems and realized they were about 100 words long, and we needed to raise enough money to cover the cost for 100 tattoos, because for our point of view, we didn't want anyone to say that they loved Lexington enough to get a tattoo to kind of make visible their commitment to the city, but ever have to worry about how they would pay for that tattoo. And we weren't sure what would happen if the poem included words that were, well, for lack of a better description, dull or uninteresting. Surely any poem that anyone would write would include words like the, and would anybody want to take them? As it turns out, there were many not only dull, but sometimes very difficult phrases that became part of Bianca's poem. There's the dregs, the armpit, and the hangover. And these weren't all of the difficult ones, but they were ones that we initially thought people wouldn't choose. And how we did this was we created a Facebook group and asked people to join the group. And we just assumed, and we made it clear that we were making this assumption, that by joining the group, they were expressing their interest. And then we would put them on a list of people who were interested in joining the project and getting a tattoo. And that group quickly grew to more than 200 people, which immediately caused us to worry, because we had just kind of assumed that Bianca would write a poem that was 100 words long. Thankfully, she wrote a poem that was way, way longer than we had anticipated, and we could include more people. In the end, we were able to include 253 participants, each with either a single word or a word and phrase surrounded by these patterns that we'll talk about.
So when we were starting this artwork, we thought of it as an artwork about Lexington, for Lexington, about commitment to one city. And it was all that, but then it became a lot more than that, which we didn't anticipate because at the time, neither of us had any tattoos. But a lot of things happened along the way that pleasantly surprised us and actually gave us a lot of delight. So for example, a number of couples, same-sex heterosexual couples, participated in this artwork. And so for them, this was also a way to express commitment to each other. This is just one of them. A number of mother and son pairs. A number of daughter and mother pairs. This is one of them. And here's another one where, without really asking us, this mother and daughter split the words of a phrase on their feet. Some brothers participated together. And then, because of how Bianca wrote her poem, the phrase "of the universe" repeated 28 times in the poem. What we didn't mention is that the two of us divided the poem into single words and phrases, and we created a unique design for each of these phrases or words. So each of the universe tattoo has a different set of circles and dots around it. And what happened is that all the folks who got an Of the Universe tattoo created a club. They called it the Of the Universe Club, which made everybody else really envious. But also some college English professors got tattoos as part of this artwork. In fact, this is how we met Leaf when he became a participant. And what we also realized, what we should have known or would have known had the two of us had any tattoos before this artwork, what we realized is that people really wanted to share the stories of their tattoos. They wanted to tell each other why they chose the words they chose, what these words meant to them once they put them on their bodies. And so we'll share Leaf's story.
I chose the cheap seats because the cheap seats are for the underdog, the working class, the poor, the scraping by folks. The cheap seats are for people who are just happy to be in the same room with great art, even if their seats are in the last row of the balcony. The cheap seats are where you can laugh loudly and no one cares. They love it, in fact, and laugh with you. The cheap seats are where I've been parked most of my life, but it's fun here. We cheap-seaters look around and discover we're all sitting next to each other, and the seats don't feel that cheap anymore.
So we ended up creating a website because participants wanted to share, and they would have shared their stories anyhow on their individual Facebook pages, and then the rest of us wouldn't have seen them. And so we created a website, and we started to regularly post photographs and stories, sometimes poems that people wrote to go with them. And so really, these stories, these narratives became as much part of the artwork as the tattoos, as Bianca's poem, as the photographs we were taking of folks, as well as a number of community events. And so these are all things that we did not anticipate that we would be doing, that would become part of the artwork. But folks wanted to meet each other in person. And so we organized a number of events for the participants to meet each other. One of them functioned as a kind of a tattoo poetry event where people could create their own poems with their own tattoos, and they were photographed. There were so many people who wanted to participate after we had given away all the words from the poem that we actually ended up giving away the title of the title of the whole project, the Lexington Tattoo Project, as well as this phrase by Bianca Spriggs. And this was actually the poet's mother-in-law who got this tattoo. We ended up also publishing a book because enough people asked us about it, and finally 2 participants said, we'll help you raise money, and they did. And then we had to figure out which of our photographs to put on the cover of the book, and so we asked people on social media to vote. We gave them a choice of 8 photographs. This is 4 of them, and these were the other 4, and the image on the top left ended up the image on the book cover and then it was fun because the book cover read "In the Lexington Tattoo Project." But the one thing that all along we knew we wanted to create was a video artwork that actually was 12 minutes long in the end, but a video artwork where Bianca reads her poem, and as she reads her poem, the words of the poem are visible on people's bodies. So kind of like a tattoo karaoke. And we ended up commissioning Ben Soli to compose music to go with Bianca's reading of the poem. So the full video artwork is 12 minutes. Because this talk is being recorded and because the artwork is not in the public realm, we cannot show it in its entirety, but we are going to show the 1-minute preview of it just to give you a sense of how it works.
It was beyond midnight when she showed up at his back door and asked him to take her on a ride through back roads out past Elkhorn Creek. It would be just like the night she wore a neon wig and her favorite leopard print heels, but lost one at the Dane, which tended to smell like a careless night out with friends. She blushed at his suggestion that instead they throw a dance party for two as bottom shelf as the cheap seats on the opening day of Keeneland. He told her that the first time seeing her under the golden ginkgo tunnel on Catalpa Street felt like finding the perfect peach in the farmer's market before brunch on a Sunday after Rocky Horror the night before.
Okay. Now, for any of you who happen to be saying to yourselves, I really need more video of tattoo karaoke, more will come. So that was a preview for Lexington Tattoo Project, but we'll show a full video of a different one. But before we do that, I want to also talk about the dots and circles that surround each phrase of the tattoo. And they were part of a secret image. So what everyone received when they got a tattoo was one line or one word or one kind of phrase from the poem, but also this collection of dots and circles that if photographed and reassembled like this collection of tattoos has been here, they create a secret image. So everyone has a piece of that secret image as well. And in Lexington, that secret image also was turned into a tattoo, and that was revealed on a kind of a final celebration night. The rules we created for ourselves to make a secret image for Lexington was it had to be something that was relevant to the people who call Lexington home, but it wasn't horses, basketball, or bourbon, which gets rid of all of our quickest references. And this, though some of you might see this and think it's the Fantastic Four, there are many more than 4 people involved. So it had nothing to do with that. This is about New Circle Road or Circle 4, kind of a part of our shared landscape that everybody lives inside or out of and tends to complain about in a number of different ways. So after we did that, at the kind of reveal party for the secret image and the video artwork, there were a number of things that happened. But one of the things that happened was we were contacted by a woman who lived in Boulder to ask us if we could do a similar project in Boulder. And we said yes. So this started a long string of yeses for us, where people would reach out to us and we would say yes as much as we possibly could. The difference was that we were committed to it still being hyperlocal. So we again worked with a poet from Boulder. Her name is Ann Waldman. She's a beat poet. Instead of having circles and dots, we had stars and dots, because that way the tattoos from Boulder would be recognizable as Boulder tattoos. And again, they created a secret image. And one of the things that happened, because we do all of this through Facebook, the only thing that's kind of Lexington based for the Boulder Tattoo Project was the 2 of us. We become friends with people in Boulder and see things that they post. This is a post from an older man who participated, and we were able to, in this time, from a distance, watch the ways the conversation about community grew connected to the project. So after Boulder, we were invited in another fashion to do this in Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, it kind of grew into include a number of different things. In fact, if you drive into Cincinnati, over one bridge, you will see a giant sculpture that says "Sing the Queen City," which is actually a phrase from this poem and part of this artwork, and also large text kind of around the city in different ways. But this poem was not written by a single poet. It instead was written by a collective of poets who started the process by collecting several hundred postcards from people who live in Cincinnati to say, what would you like us to write a poem about? Like, what is important in Cincinnati? And that's how they kind of crowdsourced the ideas for the poem. And there you'll see, again, the shapes change. So instead of circles for Lexington or stars for Boulder, they're the kind of carrots or triangles, because Cincinnati is the city of 7 hills. By this time, our ability to make secret images had elevated to something that was significantly more complex, but also because of the size of this poem was larger. So it allowed us to create this kind of more detailed secret image. And for anyone who can't already kind of make the connection, we did the same thing where we said we didn't want to make the standard Cincinnati images for the secret image, and the kind of organization that commissioned us to do this said we actually need a flying pig. So that's going to be your secret image, and we chose to make it fly a different way. And then this is Englewood. And Englewood tattoo project is the last of the tattoo projects we did. And what you'll see there is kind of an electrical resistor image, which is that large circuit, because the city of Englewood is, they built a lot of transistors, and that's important in their history.
All right, and this is an artwork that Savannah mentioned. It's our global tattoo project, which grew out of all of these city or neighborhood-based tattoo projects. And it was in response to someone who challenged us, could we imagine this artwork on a scale of the whole world? So what we imagined was the Global Tattoo Project, whose name actually is Love Letter to the World, which is comes from the title of a poem that was written for this project by Frank X. Walker. We commissioned him to write the poem for the Global Tattoo Project. At the time, Frank was the poet laureate of our state of Kentucky. He was and still is the first Black poet laureate of Kentucky. He teaches now English at the University of Kentucky. And we launched this artwork at Burning Man, hence this image, that was back in 2014. So these are some of the photographs we took at Burning Man when we returned the following year to photograph folks who had gotten tattoos and were going back to this week-long art and music festival. So this is the only one of our tattoo projects where participants had to pay for their own tattoos, because we could imagine neither raising that much money to pay for tattoos around the world, nor how we could get the money to people around the world. The designs lived on a website, so people could download them anywhere they had internet access, and multiple people could have the same tattoo and the same design, unlike the case with the city-based tattoo projects. And for this project, a lot of the pictures we got were pictures that participants took of themselves or had taken of themselves, like this one, and they downloaded them on the website, or if they knew us, they emailed them directly to us. So these are a couple of the photographs that were sent to us. We also had the poem translated in 14 different languages. And so on the website, we had the poem in English as well as the translations in 14 different languages. And each translation also came with audio, someone reading that poem in that language. And so we also got tattoos in different languages. And really the offer we extended through the website was that if anyone wanted any part of the poem as a tattoo in a different language, all they had to do was send us the translation, and we would redesign the tattoo in that language. So they could get it in this case, it's Japanese. And this is Japanese again. Now, we did take this next photograph, and we thought that in the spirit of acknowledging our ongoing relations with BCTC, we should share this image as well. And we want to share the video artwork that we created for this artwork.
I love you, world. Love your 7 different faces. Love your healing waters wide and deep. Love the thing you have with the sun and the moon. And what it teaches us about companionship, about change, about revolution. Love the mirror at your navel, how it shows off your hemispheres, illustrating important lessons about balance, about reflection, about centering ourselves. Love how much like little worlds we are. How our earthquake is your shiver, your sneeze a tsunami, an avalanche, a mudslide. When you have hot flashes, we call it drought. You once covered your whole body with ice to cool a fever. When you weep daily over our continued ignorance, our epic failures and petty squabbles, our every transgression, your waters break, and we are born again. Love your outreach, our mutual attraction, your gravitational pull. For every treasure we steal from your womb, you send us hail and thunderstorms. When we invent poisons and no antidotes and build monuments to ourselves, we send tornadoes and hurricanes to remind us of how small we truly are. And yet, every day you continue to humble, inspire, and move us to tears with your natural beauty. Our own efforts to mimic your vistas are what we dare call art and dance, music and poetry, architecture and language and love. It is the only thing we have ever gotten right. We can't pass the course on humanity. We keep throwing the lessons on harmony. And until we unlearn fear and hate, thank you, world, for this open book exam before us, for still believing we are worthy of your love. We who loved you black already know that everything we do to you, we also do to ourselves.
I should have mentioned that the voice reading the poem in English, that is Frank X. Walker, and there are also chunks of the readings in other languages as well. And I think you may have caught the phrase "unlearn fear and hate," which is which became the basis of our "Unlearn Fear and Hate" public artwork. The words for that artwork came from the poem that Frank X. Walker wrote for the Global Tattoo Project. So that's that connection.
And now we're going to talk a little bit about a work that we're currently working on and very close to finishing up. This is called Lexington in the Time of COVID. So with the Love Letter of the World, obviously that became as much as we could, made into a global experience and spread everywhere. And the two of us, just like everybody else, became quite constricted to a single location as a result of coronavirus. So we've been working on this project called Lexington in the Time of COVID. That started with our own photographs. And we took those photographs on March 16th, which was the day in Lexington when schools, universities, coffee houses, and restaurants, and just about everything else closed. That was the beginning of this project. And what we did was we spent several hours each day, actually. We would photograph excuse me, we'd take 3 photographs a day of people on their porches. We would post 2 of those photographs on Facebook. And every time we took a photograph, we would ask people how they were doing and just talk about, any challenges or interesting things that were happening. And these stories then became kind of the text that went with the photographs on Facebook. Our goal with the project was, and still is as we're finishing up, to document, connect people at a time when it seemed everyone was very disconnected in the beginning, where people were staying really very close to their own homes, and to offer hope, just so that people could see other people in the city are doing okay and hopefully feel the same themselves. As a result, we ended up photographing several families actually expecting new children. Occasionally, we were invited to be, this image turns out to be the surprise birthday party for Sean Gannon, and we showed his picture before. He's teaches welding at BCTC. And we became kind of also documenters of graduations. So different kind of life-changing or kind of transitional events that would have normally been very different than they were in the time of COVID. So we wrote daily posts with those. I advanced to this image a little bit soon, so pretend you don't see this yet. We wrote daily posts with each of those just to kind of chronicle what was happening in Lexington and sometimes what was happening in the world. And it became kind of a diary of COVID in that way. As we approached summer, we transitioned from daily posts and daily photographs to things that were more story-based. In the summer, people were able to get out of their house a little bit more, and so we felt a little bit less of a need to do that, and started collecting stories that we could share about specific groups and demographics and kind of parts of our community that maybe had the stories weren't told as they would have normally been. So these are this and this next picture I'm going to show are pictures that we captured as part of Pride, to celebrate Pride Month. And this was one of our early stories, and Kremena is going to talk about other stories that we captured later on.
Yeah, by this point, so this is now maybe June 2020. A lot of people were paying attention to the photographs and stories we were posting on Facebook. And we realized that with this artwork, we had created a platform that we could use for highlighting social justice movements and like big political moments in our lives, not just here in Kentucky, but nationally as well. And so we photographed, and this next slide shows two of the images, but we posted a number of photographs of DACA recipients. And always these are people who live in Lexington, who call Lexington home. But we photographed DACA recipients following the Supreme Court decision of June 18, 2020, which is when the Supreme Court rejected the Trump administration's attempt to dismantle DACA. And so what we did is we photographed people who are DACA recipients, and we asked them to talk about what DACA means to them and also what the Supreme Court decision means to them. And in the process of that, we realized that the two of us didn't know much about DACA. We didn't know about a lot of the not so perfect things about it. And so we felt like we were educating ourselves, but also giving a platform to people on DACA to educate the rest of us and share a little bit more about their lives and what their lives are like. A little bit later in the year, towards the end of the summer, we photographed more than a dozen Black Lexingtonians, asking them to talk about what Black Lives Matter means to them. And we were very deliberate with this collection of images and stories. And it was important to us to do this because, one, Black Lives Matter is probably the biggest social justice movement in recent American history. It definitely marked 2020, and especially the summer of 2020. And there are a lot of misconceptions surrounding what Black Lives Matter means, what it stands for. So we wanted to use our platform to lift up the voices of people who are local leaders in the Black Lives Matter movement and have things to say about what it means to them. And here, the last collection of images that we posted, and this is just a few of them, was actually 56 Lexington women of color who lead. We were very proud of this. And we posted this in honor of Vice President Kamala Harris. So we posted these 56 photographs on the eve of Inauguration Day. It was our way of celebrating both our new Vice President and everything she stands for, but also celebrating women of color here in Lexington who have many different ways of being involved in the community and leading. So the next issue of the Chevy Chaser and Southsider actually will include a photo essay on this artwork, and it will include a lot of photographs and stories we're not sharing today. So that's something else to look for. And the last thing we want to end with is the website, lextimecovid19.com, which has a lot of photographs and stories that go with them. It does not include all of them, but we're working on archiving the entire artwork on this website. So hopefully by May, every single Facebook post we've made and photographs shared as part of it will be on the website, because as Kurt said, we do think of it as a diary of sorts of COVID-19 here in Lexington, and we wanted that to be available on the website, because Facebook comes and goes, and who can sort through so much Facebook? So this is what we prepared for today, and we're happy to respond to any comments or questions.
Thank you, Kurt and Kremena. That was fantastic. If you have a question, you can type it in the chat section and I will ask it. I'll ask a question just to get us started. So I'm interested in your process in terms of, how does a project begin and how do you know it's a project? Do you start with an idea, or are you thinking about a certain type of activism? That's probably one of those questions, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? But and I know it's different for every artist. So, you know, what's your process in coming up with a new project or starting a new piece of art?
Well, I'll start, and then and then Kurt can give his version if he has a different one. I would say it's always the idea. The activism, it's funny because at some point it always becomes an artwork that is about lifting up voices and making people who may not be as visible in good ways, like if they want to be visible, not exposing people. But it's always an idea, and it's an idea that we either live with for so long that we feel like we're so compelled to do this. We don't know if it will work. Like with the first tattoo project, the Lexington tattoo project, we had no idea if anyone would want to participate. No idea. We didn't have any tattoos at the time, and we thought, will people want to do that? Like, will they want to get a tattoo that someone else designs for them? That's part of a poem. And it was only when people started to really want to share their stories that we realized, wait, like this is an artwork not just about Lexington, it's about like people and their own connections to each other, existing connections, new connections they're making. It's also about the story of our city, because at the time, I think now we're used to this, but at the time, a lot of people were saying things like, well, Lexington is so cool, and like now we're going to show others that like a tattoo project can happen in Lexington. Yeah, I think it usually is the idea, and then eventually we realize there is more going on here, and can we build on that, and can we actually work to lift up voices? Can we highlight these stories, like Black Lexingtonians talking about Black Lives Matter? But when we were starting this particular artwork, we had no idea that we would keep it going for a year and that eventually it would become this kind of platform. Why are you smiling?
Kremena answers very long.
Sorry.
She starts by saying, and then Kurt will answer. I'll just say I agree with 85% of what she says, which is pretty standard for us. Actually, you know, one of us has an idea. We often don't remember where any specific artwork started, because these are the result of conversations that we've been having for a long period of time. And what happens is that we end up realizing that we create a shorthand explaining where the idea came from, even to ourselves, but it's really the result of many conversations over several years.
Okay. One of the questions in the chat, and I'm going to guess this is referring to the love letter to the world. The question is, how was the project received in other countries where folks like LGBTQ people may or may not be as accepted?
Yeah, and that's a good question. The question was about specifically tattoo projects. It seems that there were images from Bulgaria in that video, which is where Kremena is from, and I know that those images that are in there are actually in part, some, not all of them, some of them are from a trip that we took to Bulgaria. That artwork spread in Bulgaria in the same way I believe that it spread anywhere, which ultimately is through kind of social media and through platforms where people share with other people they know and like communities. So it didn't often bump into in our awareness any kind of tension where people might resist kind of the sentiments within the poem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually when we take our artworks to other cities or communities, it's because someone invites us from within that community or city. I don't know that we have contacted people and said, hey, can we bring this to your community? Because it really, for any of our artworks to work, there has to be community buy-in. And if we're not part of another community, we cannot make that happen. So there really has to be someone there who drives it. And so I think that's the reason why we didn't bump up against hatefulness, to put it that way.
Okay. Well, so you're mentioning community buy-in. So, I mean, how does art work to build a community? How does it work to bring a community together?
Well, I think the Lexington Tattoo Project is a great example, a great way to answer that question in Lexington, because now anyone who's on this call that hasn't heard about the Lexington Tattoo Project prior to this, now you know about it, and now you know everyone who has a tattoo. There are 256 people who call Lexington home that have one of these tattoos. And what happens is that when it warms up and people start taking off their heavy layers of winter clothing, you see this. And it turns out most people are happy to tell you the story of almost any tattoo that you ask them about. And these start conversations. And one of the things that we've been really, we hoped would happen, we didn't know how quick it would happen, is that people from cities find each other. So we got a photograph sent to us, texted to us by someone who was a participant in the Boulder Tattoo Project when he bumped into a participant from the Lexington Tattoo Project in the airport. And they introduced themselves and they took a selfie together. And similarly, we've got pictures from people, at big kind of national concerts where they run into 2 or 3 people in the bathroom and they take pictures of everyone in the bathroom with their tattoos. The bathroom is not important in the pictures, I should say. It just happens to be where they met.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm standing here and trying to remember, did I know Sean Gannon before the Lexington Tattoo Project? And I bring him up because he's your colleague and he joined this call at some point. So he might still be there watching. And I think I met Sean because he was one of the participants in the Lexington Tattoo Project. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we knew of him because of his rocket booster that he built.
But so like once we met Sean, at some point I stopped thinking of him. Oh, here is a participant in an artwork that Kurt and I made. Truth, yes, great, thank you, Sean. And I started to think, oh, this is Sean, who is my neighbor and my friend. And so like our classes of ours now have worked with Sean and some of his students. Then he ended up participating in the Global Tattoo Project, and then we took his picture as part of our ongoing artwork. And so like these kinds of connections I can describe in my own life, but I think they're true for a lot of the folks who are part of any of these artworks. And so they keep building upon each other. People meet other people who maybe they wouldn't have met if they hadn't like come to an event we organized as part of Unlearn Fear and Hate or as part of the Lexington Tattoo Project. And you could say it's a lot of work, except I don't think of it as work. I think of it as giving to my community. And I mean, giving and taking, right? That's how community is built. And so I think people find their own ways of staying connected with other people they've met. And it really does build community. I mean, we could trace, like we photograph local drag performers in 2008. So that was 13 years ago when we were working on a whole different artwork called Passing. And that was based on photographs and oral history interviews with drag queens who call Lexington home. And through the years, some of these drag queens have been part of like many of our artworks. And then in turn, we invite them to visit our classes. And so we stay in touch with a lot of people we've met, and they stay in touch with each other.
That's fantastic. Someone has asked, can you both comment on your experience as collaborators? You collaborate with one another, but also with the students, community at large, etc. What are the challenges and what are the benefits?
We've been collaborating for a number of years. Since 2006 is when we first started working together. And the challenges and benefits for our personal collaboration change over time. But I do want to say that with the type of work that we make in the community, one, sometimes it can be really exhausting and just the logistics of making it happen. Sometimes it can be it can be hard with kind of some pushback that you get. And for the two of us, I believe I hope Kremena feels it's fair to say this as well. One of the biggest advantages is that we tend not to get burnt out at the same time. And so there may be times when I just can't take it anymore. And thankfully, Kremena, for whatever unpredictable reason to me, is like super excited right at that moment. And so we can kind of cover for each other's ebb and flow. So what about with the community at large?
Well, the benefits are that we love community, and so it's great. Like the more people we get to know, the more people we work with in a number of different ways. The challenges sometimes are that much as I love like community and being part of it and helping to build community, when it's not COVID, there's so many events going on. And we try to go and support like as much as possible, and sometimes it's a lot. So when people are doing fundraisers and a race that to benefit something, and then there's a poetry reading and so many different events, so that can become a little bit a lot. But now after a year of nothing or hardly anything, it's not exactly a problem.
I'm usually going to Georgetown, and please send me a message. We have open.
There's Sean.
There's Sean. Yeah.
He doesn't know he's visible to everybody right now.
He's muted. Well, let's talk a little bit about art and activism. What role does art play in activism? You know, we see things like Black Lives Matter and protest signs and emblems and symbols. And those seem like obvious choices. But what other kinds of roles can art play in our activism?
Well, I want to say thanks for asking that question, Savannah. I think there really are so many different ways that art has a spot in activism of any form. I do want to say that for me, it seems to be most impactful in what we try to do with our work, but even when I'm looking at other people's artwork, when it's the fact that it's art becomes a surprise. Like if when with the Lexington Tattoo Project, for example, we were to the point of people having tattoos on their bodies and talking to us, and we're building community through this process of getting tattoos and the poem. And somebody asked us, they found out we were artists, and they said, well, what is your art like? And this is someone who actually has a tattoo on their arm at the time, or what is your medium? And, you know, we were able to say, well, in this case, your participation in this is our medium. And I think in many ways, for me, when art announces itself as art with a capital A, people tend to withdraw from kind of emotional availability to it. And when it kind of approaches them more like a sneak attack, where they become involved before they realize that it's art.
Yeah, and I entirely agree with that. And the other part for me is things that humanize us to each other, because I think it's really easy to dismiss. Well, I don't know if it's easy for some people. Yeah, it's easy for some people to say, oh, Black Lives Matter, and pronounce on a movement that they maybe don't know a lot about, or they've seen some snippets on the news about. But I think it's very different when you see actual people with faces and personal stories. So I think that stories always humanize us to each other, and art is a vehicle for stories, and sharing of stories, I think, can become a powerful agent for social change in ways that are different or maybe impossible for other mediums, like the news, or like letters to the editor, or books that people have to pick up and read. And art is wonderful and delightful, and it surprises people, catches people unaware. So I think all of that makes art a little bit different.
Okay. Well, if anyone has a question, go ahead and type it. We'll start to wrap up. But one last question, or one question that I'll have, and we'll see if anyone else has anything. But let's say I'm a college freshman and I'm really interested in art and being an artist of some sort. I'm not sure what's a good way to get started here in Lexington, exploring art, or, you know, deciding what kind of art I might want to try to do. Where do I go? How do I get started?
That's a great question, especially when, you know, if someone is listening to us talk and what the art that we're making and talking about doesn't sound or appear like drawing or painting or the kind of traditional modes of making. But I think in Lexington has, in non-COVID times especially, has a lot of places to see art. And I do think that, and I tell my students the same thing, the most important thing for making art is that you just look at a lot of it. It's not something that, you know, if someone wants to be a writer, they know that they need to read a lot of things. That tends to be kind of a known approach. But when people want to be artists, for whatever reason, in this culture, we are resistant to looking at art. But the most important thing really is just to get out and see as much as art as possible. And Lexington is a really ideal sized city because there's always something happening. There's very little kind of barriers to entry to whatever the art event is.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I have someone who's asked a question, not in the chat, but sent it to me. After all of these tattoo projects, since you started with the very first one, you didn't have any tattoos. Since then, have you been inspired to get more?
Yes.
It's a slippery slope. It's true. What they tell you is totally true.
It is. And we handle it in different ways. I think I will always just have one tattoo. It just so happens that tattoo grows. It just grows and spreads and spreads. Because getting a tattoo was not something that the people I lived with in my home all thought, hey, that's awesome, you should get a tattoo. Instead, there was like, I don't know if you should get a tattoo, but I have one, and one growing seems like an easier dialogue than getting 12.
No, that's a very fun and funny question, because I just have a couple, one from the Global Tattoo Project and one from the Lexington Tattoo Project. And like Kurt, I have constraints in my life. So like that's why I'm not covered in tattoos. But I have to tell you, when I look at people without tattoos, their bodies seem empty to me. It's like, it's a lot of emptiness there. Some art could look nice. But yeah, it is addictive.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. This has been fantastic. It's a great way for us to have a conversation about aspects of the novel that we read, without, just sitting down talking about literary themes. Tattoos and art and activism they're all interconnected in so many various ways. And so it's been great to hear about the work you've done and the work that you're doing. So thank you both very much. Thank you all who have joined. We did record this, so I'm sure there will be more people who will watch it. But yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.